Hello everyone, welcome to our Circle and Salve Women. For this video, we're going to talk about my article that I wrote regarding the permission of memories to destroy chance. And so interesting because I have hurt my back so many times. I think I've mentioned in one of my articles, really having respect for stretching. And we had just come from many walking, like days of just walking around during our spring break. Truly enjoyed it. And yet coming back to teaching, I can exaggerate this any more than what it really is. I was putting on my socks and then all of a sudden I felt my back snap, and I just, you know what, I went to school and throughout the whole week I was just telling my students I'm just having a little bit of just an imbalance in my walking and so forth, and it just got to that point where it was just like, okay, time to go see a chiropractor. And it's been like over a decade, I want to say, within that time frame of getting a chiropractor, and so, or seeing a chiropractor. And it just got to that point where it was just like, I was telling my colleague, that she was laughing along with me because it's not attractive to be walking around like you're the Hunchback of Notre Dame without the hunchback. And at least for me, I was like, you have to find light in your moments. And this goes in the connection with the permission and memories to destroy chance, because I wish I would, there are just things that my husband's very good at telling me. I forget certain things and I tend to filter a lot of things out. And that's just defensively, that's just how I am. Just things that, I just feel like you don't have to take into account into memory. I always consider it like a UPS truck. That's what I tell my students. And I know I've told my children that as well, is that it's not that I would like to think, yes, as we get older, we tend to forget more things, but you truly are a truck that's storing all this information. As you get, as the years go by, you just say to yourself, there's some things just not worth holding on to. And so you just let it go, let it go, let it go. And there's some things that perhaps, just like when you donate certain clothes and shoes and you look back and go, oh my gosh, I'm going to wear that outfit today. And then you look in your closet and realize I already donated that. So some things perhaps you wish you hadn't let go, but that's just how our storage is made up. At least I would like to believe. So, and I'm sure there's some scientific backing to that, we sometimes are selective of what let go, and sometimes we hold on to things when we really go, why am I even thinking about this? And so in regards to this article, it is about that permission of memories to destroy chance. Once again, is that sometimes we end up making decisions based off of our spite, based off of some of the things that have stung us in life. And I remember volunteering at this one sporting event, and it was in wrestling, and just doing my own piece, enjoying getting ready for the next competition on my mat. And then all of a sudden, not really my mat because it's always the referees, but then all of a sudden I see this conversation, or at least what was trying to be a conversation between the referee and the coach that was starting to prepare for a match at this point. And all of a sudden, it was just a mispronunciation of the team name. And I honestly didn't know how to pronounce the team either. We were, we were at this one tournament where there were many different teams. And so I was curious, but I didn't say anything because it wasn't in my part. I was just listening in and being prepared to focus in on the match that was about to begin. And I really sensed this effort of the coach, or excuse me, the referee, to try to have a conversation. And the coach just wasn't having it. And even though the referee made really a great attempt to pronounce the name, it even seemingly made it worse, because then all of a sudden the coach seemed to have this irritability in their reaction and not even giving eye contact, and just having that attitude of, let's move on already. And my heart goes out to moments like that, because I know there have been moments that I am not at all perfect. In fact, I would like to think that I can articulate myself in many ways when talking, and yet when I have conversations, I can get just downright offensive. Not to my point of just waking up and saying, I'm going to offend people today. But I would like to think that the way I think and see things may sometimes be different from the way I convey it. And, you know, there's a lot of humor in my words sometimes. And yet there are some parts where it's like, wow, maybe that didn't come out in the way you would like to. And so with that type of understanding of myself, I think that I've gotten very understanding of how sometimes people may seem offensive. And then in my heart, I go, in my spirit, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, okay, you're always, you know, they didn't mean it like that. And I'm always told, oh, you're always looking for, you know, looking things on a positive side. Because for me, I have to. That's like that part of the survival skill of just living the world in that positivity. Having known that there are those that mean to hurt you. They mean to really try to strike hard. And so in that case, like to be victorious, I've always made the decision to go, just do your best to understand. And, you know, I mean, in my article, I mentioned that I used to say this spice. One of my daughters had told me or shared with me this one spice that I remember her putting on watermelon. And I was just like very quiet at that time of listening. And my mind was in so many things at that time. And yet when I tried it myself, I remembered I was at the store. I was like, oh my goodness, that's that spice that my daughter had shared with me. And so ever since then, I've always loved it on my vegetables and my fruits. And so I'm at this meeting, a very small selected meeting, and I see someone just sprinkling it onto their fruits or vegetables, whatever they may have brought with them. And I was like, oh my goodness, I love that stuff. And I said tagine, and you know, I laugh about everything. So that's just, again, my personality. And so, you know, it was just like, that little pause of, maybe I'm not saying this right. And I was just like, is that how you say it? Because, you know, I'm thinking I may not be saying that right. And I'm putting that on myself, you know? And so without even looking at me, the person across from me said, it's tahine. And I was like, okay, thank you so much, because now I know how to pronounce it. I've been mispronouncing it for so long, obviously, and so thank you. And I put it on myself, and yet I feel like sometimes people just, not to their fault, you know, it's more that when you have been stricken with so many attacks, that spike grows, you know. And I am so thankful when I look back at, I remember, I didn't mention this in my article, but I remember when my papa's car wasn't working. And we were both, you know, outside, and all of a sudden I saw him get his charging cables, and, you know, he went, excuse me, miss, do you think you could help me charge up my car? I mean, he had charging cables, and, you know, people were just there. I remember a lady was just like, no, you know, and didn't even say no, like literally just shook her head. And you know, my dad still, and I really honestly think that that's where I get my personality from, that piece of resilience is, you know, kind of just grinned to himself and smirked like, okay, that didn't work, and moved on to another one. And I've really learned that, you know, in spite of what everybody else tries to give you, you have to ultimately make the decision to just be right in the spirit, in the heart, in the mind, so that your actions still can forego what it is that you're trying to go for. You know, he needed to use the charging cable, so because our car wasn't working. And that is truly something that you can go by in life, is that yes, there are people trying to always change that perspective in you, and that the world is not always filled with ugly and darkness and people who want to hurt you. And yet our mind tends to, and again, this is speaking for myself, and always me relating this, I'm always thinking that maybe someone out there can relate and then be healed from their wounds, because I know that after a while, you tend to start to create this memory of who hurt us, you know, and then all of a sudden it's like, as soon as you see someone who may have replicate that or seemingly have some kind of connection to what you remember, all of a sudden it's like our guards are up and we're ready to just defend ourselves. And that's how I felt when I was sitting there just quietly to myself. I had the table ready to, you know, score and so forth, because everything is like computerized now, so sometimes for the most part I can run the table by myself during a match. And so, you know, it's interesting because I'm sitting there and I was just really sadly hurting for the referee that was just doing their best to try to create it, have some conversation. And it is what it is, and you have to let it go, because you realize that people are growing and we are just moving about life, and we know that as we interact, we have to know how to handle those moments. And whether you are the person who is having the conversation, or you're having that vantage point and you just become a spectator of the entire ordeal. So that was me. It's just like I could only reflect for myself and grow from that and go, okay, how am I seeing this? And so what I saw at that moment was a chance for me to reflect later, and hence this is why I did the article. Is we have walls that we create to protect ourselves, whether it be our heart, our mind, our body, and our spirit. And that is just to make sure that we preserve whatever strength that we still may have. And, as we continue to rebuild, because we're like perhaps the batteries that do need to recharge every time, and as we deplete it through our energy, or maybe our light, our good emotions, we need to recharge. We need to somewhat come back to where we used to be, our happy place. And when you are being like just facing one thing after another that hits you, and then it keeps trying to pull you away from that happy place, and then the next thing you know, you're dark and you just have forgotten any light. That's not where anyone should be. And unfortunately, I think that when we are caught up in that and we throw ourselves into that pit and think that there can be no longer any good in what's around us, then that's how we see the world. So in my article, I'd mentioned that, the seas, the clouds, the air, it's peaceful until something interferes that causes us to change our perception. But that's truly what it is that all of a sudden we're looking at it as like, okay, that is no longer this beautiful sea. Now we see this, this hurricane or this tsunami or whatever it is that we then encounter. The clouds, now this heavy rain that's poured out on our picnic blanket, and now we're having to take shelter, and all our food and everything has to be packed away. It ended up not being the day that we had hoped for. The air, the beautiful breeze ends up just messing up someone's hair, or while you're running a race or so, everything has to be at a pause. Whatever it may be, all of a sudden it causes this different outlook of life. It's like, oh, I got to prepare for these, because then when you realize that those had somewhat of a negative impact in how you dealt with it, whether it took you 10 steps back or then made you work so much harder to get even a step forward, then it's like that's always going to be this embedded memory that you have to be careful for those moments. And so when we say careful, I see when I walk around, it's like there's that spite. And I saw it in the coach. I saw it in the person who was sitting across from me when it was just a simple, pronunciation of a term. And I hope that in my article, we really have to send out the message. And this ultimately is my message. And I'm going to close this up, is that, do we really fear chance to have a different outcome? And therefore, we prepare for the outcome we fear, if that makes sense. In reflecting that, I know I can say yes. I know that sometimes in the past, I have had to come to terms that I was looking at something just as if what I had feared would be the worst of it, and again, it goes that, false evidence appearing real. Fear is real on its own, but, and we feel it, but what we foresee is almost as if it's what we're running to. And then as soon as it happens, we're like, yep, I knew it was exactly what, anticipated happening. That's exactly what happened. But it may not even be the reality. It's almost like in your mind, you think it's the reality. And, and so when I look back, I go, well, maybe that person just wasn't listening to me because they had so much on their mind. And just like when I hurt my back this week, I had to tell my students, you know, I'm so sorry if I'm hardly hearing you sometimes, like the pain kicks in and so forth. You know, you have to sit there and say that. It's like you have to own why you are who you are. And that is the part where we have to look at each other and give each other permission to seemingly be offensive, and yet say to ourselves, they didn't mean it that way. They were really trying to make it into positive, into some light. And I believe that if we could do that, I know I try every day, and there are some that are going to obviously be in a bad day, and as I've said, the green balls and the red balls, people are going to be throwing the red balls at you, you know, because they don't want to carry all of that darkness and that load on their own. They want to somehow be able to be relieved from it, and if they can throw it and you're catching it, they're grateful. And usually it's the strong ones, I'd like to think, or somewhat the vulnerable ones that says, hey, I'll take it, you know, give it to me. We end up throwing it at some people, but when you catch that, you then ultimately have to decide, how am I going to handle this? Am I going to just, you know, throw it away and get rid of it, or am I going to then pass it on and give it to someone else? And that's what we hope we don't do, is that we hold it in, and then all of a sudden it builds up, and then that's all we've got is this darkness, this spite, this memory of, you know, destroying any outcome or chance that we may have in the future, because every outcome can be different depending on how we see it as a new day, as a new moment, as a new circumstance, as a new situation. Just because we had a bad memory in the past, just like that UPS truck, you know, let it go and start again, start anew. And there are the good memories that go with that sometimes, but at least we are trying to point, you know, pick out the ones that we are saying to ourselves not worth holding on to. So sometimes I get rid of, you know, the nice sweater, the nice shoes, because I was over it. And then maybe months later, maybe even a year later, I'm like, should have not let that one go. That's okay, because I know along with that, I got rid of probably 10 or 20 or a little bit more, you know, with it that I didn't need to hold on to. So with that said, God bless us all, as my mother would say. And thank you so much for listening. Let there be light always in, you know, in your heart, in your mind, your body, and spirit. And always just look at things in the best intentions, so that you don't have to carry the poison of thinking that anyone is out to always hurt. Do your part of trying to heal, and then let it go. Let it start from there, and just let go of anything trying to hurt any of us, because we don't need to hold on to it. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next time. Thank you.